Hi, everyone. My name is Andrew Filmer. I am the facilitator of this session that will talk about facilitating. Uh, what we have today is the group of five of us here who will each sort of play a role in not only sharing the hints or recommendations to the art of facilitating, but in some cases, as you can see from Gabriel's role over here in parentheses, some of us might actually play one of the characters who might appear in one of your sessions. Before we begin, let me just say, it's wonderful to have you on board. We look forward to this event, and we know that your role here will be quite important in engaging with our participants and building that sense of networking, which is key to making this event a success. So a big thank you from me. With that, I do have sort of an agenda over here, don't we all? In the art of facilitating, I'd like to actually bring us to these topics over here. Of course, in your section, when you actually facilitate a particular section or session, it doesn't mean that you would have such an agenda. It may be a way more freewheeling. But for now, we're actually going to talk about these topics over here, which hopefully will be of use to you. We're going to begin with the first two, that of encouragement and that of the segue. With encouragement, I'm going to ask Irene to talk a little bit about how to encourage the participants in any breakout group to engage. And with the segue, Sylvain is going to talk about how we move from one section to another. So Irene, maybe we can begin with you introducing yourself a bit before, talking a little bit about encouragement.
Thanks, Andrew. Hi, everyone. My name is Irene. I'm from Bandung, Indonesia. And you might have some people that are shy in your group, but that doesn't mean that they don't have good things to say. So one way to encourage them is via the chat box, and you can chat them privately. You can say things like, anything that's on your mind that you'd like to share, feel free to share it in the group.
Yes, and in this particular scenario over here, we actually have someone who's designated as the I don't want to talk person over here with Kenny. So one way would be not just to message Kenny in the chat group saying, hey, how are you doing? Would you like to speak next? That's one way of doing it. But another way is you could just directly ask a question that you might plan to ask in the conversation, saying that to Kenny, as says, oh, the next question I have is going to be this. Do you think you'd be comfortable answering that? Could I call on you to answer for this? So at least that person, it doesn't feel out of place in being caught off guard if I'm going to just talk to Kenny over here. Yeah, and Kenny's already responding, so he may not want to talk, but he's definitely reacting. Am I right, Kenny?
Yes.
Yes, again. And that's the way we do it. So next, we are going to go to the idea of a segue, right? Once you get people talking, how do you move from that to the next topic if we need to get the conversation going? So Win, I think you have some thoughts on this.
Yeah. So as the discussion goes along, you should just follow the conversation, try to guide it smoothly along from one topic to another. It might also help to read up on the backgrounds of some of the participants beforehand so that you know what they could offer, and then you could help to guide the convo to each person so that everyone gets a chance to speak.
So Kenny, I seem to recall that you are running something called the Rounder production. I think that involves a lot of moving from one topic to another because the number of things that you organize. Is that true, Kenny?
Yes, I think the way how we're going to facilitate everything is that we need to identify whether what they are talking is really relevant to us, and at some point we have to cut in and say it's time to move on to the next topic, or we have to find out some connections to the next question as well.
Right. So great. So we've actually covered over here, if we go back to the presentation that I prepared over here, we've covered encouragement, we've covered the segue. I've tried to bring out Kenny from his shell, I think, if I may say so myself, rather successfully. And the next thing we're going to talk about is silence. And I'm going to talk about silence. And Kenny's actually going to talk about the opposite of silence, if that's okay with you, Kenny. And so how do you deal with a room full of people who just don't want to talk? That's going to happen. What you don't want to do is what I'm doing right now, which is to just keep talking myself, hoping somebody will interrupt me. The worst thing to do in a room full of silent people is for you to keep talking. Instead, it might be good to do exactly what Irene was saying earlier on, encouraging people to, to go in one way, in one direction or the next, just to say, would you like to speak up about this? Sometimes you might want to think about the kind of questions that you're asking. Are they questions that that require a bit too much of people to actually brainstorm big ideas? Maybe that's the problem with the group dynamic. Maybe you should give them something like a yes or no, and that could be particularly helpful. If you are more technologically adept, you might want to try something like the Mentimeter, which you do have to set up in advance if you're interested. For some reason, it's just a way of putting like a board where people put questions. But there's something about the program which gets people engaged in some situations, so that might work. Does anybody else have an idea about how to deal with a room full of silent people? Gabriel?
Well, if I have an idea. I have an idea.
Oh, yeah.
So
Go ahead.
it really helps if you actually have pre-prepared questions, and then you can ask the members in your group some of those questions. And like Andrew said, they can be arranged from heavy questions, like how do you think your life is going to be after this pandemic? Or it could be some very lighter questions. For example, do you have an Instagram account? What's your Instagram account? Can I follow it? To what's your favorite music? Who's your favorite composer? Those kind of questions.
Great, wonderful. And I'm going to now pass it to Kenny. Ironically, Kenny is the one who says that he doesn't want to talk, but he's going to talk about quite the opposite of that.
Yeah, I think the most important thing that the people who talks a lot is that the first thing, they might not aware of the time. Second is that they are so into the topic and they want to be part of the group. So I think we shouldn't stop them immediately, but as a facilitator, we should look at the time. If time permits, we should let them continue. But before it ends, we can send them a chat on the chat box and tell them that it's almost time, we might want to cut off at this point. But in the case that they miss out the chat, you can just stop them like in a nice way. Say, oh, well, good to hear from you right now, and I think it's time to move to next topic.
Great, and it's nice to hear from you, and it's time to move to the next topic. So the next topic is that of, we've already covered pre-prepared questions, so Irene, you're ahead of your time, you've seen the future. The next two things are audio, video, and just the idea that you can rename yourself like we have here and put yourself as facilitator. So really the last two topics are that of audio and video. I'm going to pass it over to Gabriel over here to talk about these particular topics.
Hi everyone. So I'll be talking a little bit.
Thank you very much, Gabriel. It's been a real pleasure to have all of you. Sorry, just joking.
Yeah, that's not what you should do as a facilitator.
About time. So,
Yeah,
Gabriel,
anyway.
please, I won't stop you this time.
Yeah, so with regards to audio, sometimes you might have people who have like just this perpetual background noise going on, and it's just disrupting the whole conversation. People can't hear very clearly, and sometimes it's hard to identify who it is. So in cases like that, you might want to just tell the group to, okay, maybe just keep yourselves muted. And if you want to speak up, then unmute yourself. But sometimes, if you have like a really nice group like what we have here, then you might not actually need to mute everyone. Everyone can just speak naturally when they want to.
And Gabriel, have you actually come across this situation before?
Yes, actually, I mean, in some of the classes, the sectionals that I conduct, there's just this one person who's like having a toilet that's flushing all the time, or like a tap that's going on all the time, and it's pretty annoying. So
how often do you think it happens in a percentage for the sessions that you have?
I think, yeah, it's a 50-50.
That's
Yeah,
really
especially with people who are not so good with tech, it usually happens.
right. That's really interesting. What did I do just now, just to make Gabriel, who's playing the role as someone who just doesn't want to stop talking? I, interestingly enough, encourage him to talk a bit more by asking questions. But the nature of the questions is I'm trying to narrow him down to questions where it's basically going to end up as a yes or no. So when I first asked him, does it happen to you? He encouraged him to talk more about that. But so I narrowed it down to about what percentage does it happen? And he has no real it's a corner where he doesn't have that much to maneuver. He has to tell me, oh, about 50% of the time. It gives a nice cadence for me to come in and say, thanks, that's great, and we can move on now. So there's a real polite way, there's a psychology of getting, I have a student who just always just can't, but he's a nice guy, you know? So I don't want to discourage him, but this is one of the strategies I do to narrow him down into giving him a final sort of response and then moving on. So Gabriel, I didn't mean to interrupt you too much with that, but carry on.
No, that was really a good learning point for everyone, I think. So yeah, and then the next point, talking about video, I guess, you know, we really want to keep everyone's video on, you know, to keep it more, you know, so that it's not you're just talking to an empty wall of squares. So yeah, as much as possible, encourage everyone's video to be on. And it's not really on the slide, but I thought maybe we should also encourage everyone to exchange contacts with regards to Instagram, Facebook accounts, maybe in the chat, so that we can, you know, continue the conversation off the Zoom session.
Yeah, and that's a great idea. Maybe they could, you could encourage them to do that at the start of the session. Then while somebody is talking, you could click on one of those sites, and if you need some filler over here, you could say, let's just have a look at you know, this person's page is really great. What you're doing over here, could I ask you a question about that? So getting people to share things at the start may be the best way for you to fill up any gaps that occur later on. With that, I think, if you don't mind, Gabriel, me bringing it back to the group as a whole, does anybody else have anything to advise our facilitators as we prepare, as we are moving forward to this conference? And that's one of those cases where there's this bit of awkward silence over here, right? And I don't know about you, there are cases when the awkward silence is meant to be filled, and I have that with my students. I actually have the theme song for Jeopardy playing when I really want them to answer something. So it's funny, it adds a bit of humor to it. But of course, you know, if you do want to fill that up with a bit of background music or something, just be aware that you have to be a bit adept with the technology to know that you're not flooding everybody's speakers with very loud music. But those are additional strategies. If not, then if there are no additional comments to be had, then I'd like to say thank you once again for participating. We look forward to seeing you, and I'm sure your role as facilitators will aid this conference very much indeed. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.